Hello, this is Omni Al-Dasuki. I'm the editor of the HR Observer. Today with me is Liz Wiseman. Liz Wiseman is known very well for her book, The Multipliers, also another book which is called Impact Players, but there are many other books that she's very well known for. However, Liz's background is she was, and she's still a CEO. She's CEO of the Wiseman Group, which is a leadership research and development firm headquarters in Silicon Oasis. We have here in Dubai, Silicon Oasis, sorry, and Silicon Valley, California. Welcome, Liz. Speaking to us today from California. It's pretty early there, so I'm really grateful to have you here with us.
Well, I'm grateful to be here. And actually, next week I'll be flying from Silicon Valley to Silicon Oasis. So I will
That's cool. Wow, I know. I always get them confused. Even though I have been to Silicon Valley and I have been to Silicon Oasis, and they're 12 hours apart and 16 or 20 hours by flight apart. So thank you. And I want to start first by asking you about your own background. And I would love to understand more about your journey and what drove you into who you have become today.
Well, I guess the work I do now is the work that I wanted to do right out of college. And in some ways, I do it now because I failed at doing it out of college. But I came out of graduate school really wanting to teach leadership. And I tried to get a job with the premier management training company here in the United States. And I weaseled my way into an interview. And I remember what the president said to me. He said, gee, you seem great, but if you want to teach leadership, maybe you should get some experience leading, like yourself. And that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to lead. I wanted to teach leadership. And so I didn't get that job, much to my dismay. And I took my backup job at this young growing software company, Oracle, where I got thrown into leadership. And so I found myself leading, and not just leading a team, but leading the training function. So I spent the first half of my career leading the learning function for an organization. And now, instead of leading the teaching, I'm teaching about leading, which is really where I wanted to start. But, I've, there's a quote, is it Ralph Waldo Emerson, perhaps? It's like the goal in all of our journeyings is to arrive back where we began and to know it for the first time. And I feel like that's very much the case for me. I'm now doing work that I wanted to do, but I feel like I know it now in a way that I wouldn't know it if I had taken this straight shot to what I wanted to do.
I was going to ask you, just to follow up, how is it different being a leader in comparison to teaching leadership? What's the difference between them both?
Well, it's where the pressure sits. When you teach leadership, you might think, oh, wow, there's a lot of pressure on you because people are looking to you and acting on your words, or you're standing on a stage and you've got a lot of eyeballs looking at you. No, the pressure is on the leader who has to figure out how to balance often conflicting needs and forces. And I think like maybe the strength that I bring to my work helping other people lead is knowing the pressure that you feel as a leader, that somebody's not going to be happy in this decision. Someone's going to lose their job in one country because you're establishing jobs in another country. And that how do you get the results for the business and protect the well-being of the people? Like these are forces that pull at you. And, there's often no really clear answers. I had a boss, one of my first bosses, and my best boss had said, every course of action has problems. And it's about picking which problems you want to manage.
So you've led teams, and then you wrote a book that actually helped a lot of people lead teams. By the way, my first leadership position, I actually bought your book to read about it. I was like, oh, let me read this book. And I want to understand what drove you to write the book Multiplier, and what do you think was real? Have you ever thought there was real effect to a certain group over the other? What do you think about the whole journey of writing the book?
Well, some people would suggest that multipliers was my post-Oracle therapy. And in many ways it was because I came out of 17 years at this really hard-charging, fast-growing, ambitious, interesting company. And I'm surrounded by brilliant people. And I think like multipliers started my first day at Oracle where I realized I was working with brilliant people. The Oracle had this interesting hiring profile where they looked for people who were really, really smart, top of their class, from the top universities in the world, in the top, so people are
Yeah.
coming in from MIT and Harvard and Princeton and Stanford. And I hadn't gone to one of those universities. And I mean, I had a great education and, I'm bright and all of that, but I just was sort of in awe of all of these brilliant people around me. I felt so lucky to work there. And I think because I was enamored by all of these brilliant people, I noticed that not all brilliant people end up creating brilliance around them. I think I just began watching how this story played out, where you took a really smart person, you put them into management, and for some of those people, their intelligence became a weapon and they shut down other people, and you knew how every meeting was going to end. They were going to end up looking like the smartest person in the room. And then I was struck by all the people who were so bright, all the straight A students, pedigree education, but somehow they didn't weaponize that education, those insights, that knowledge. They used their intelligence in a way that invited other people to weigh in and be smart and come up with ideas. And I was just so struck. And I was also struck at how, like my colleagues that I thought were brilliant, I would watch these brilliant people cower around certain leaders but yet be at their sharpest around others. And I'm like, what is going on here?
Mhm.
And so I'm observing this for almost 2 decades, watching the effect of this. And then when I left my job leading and left my role as an executive and went and spent some time as an executive coach, I'm now seeing that play out for some of the people I'm coaching.
Mhm.
And a number of those people that I was coaching were like brilliant, genius level, brilliant people, but struggled to not have a dampering effect on their team. And that's when I realized that this was a pattern. This was more than just an Oracle phenomenon. This was an everywhere phenomenon. And I went looking for research on this and I couldn't find anything quantitative or anything on this. And so that's when I set out to study this. I had come out of a data company and had sort of a strong data orientation and a real thirst to understand this. And I did the research, wrote that up, that became a book. And
Good book.
and then I apparently got the book bug. I just thought I kind of needed to write this book, but it turned out I really loved the investigative nature of book writing, of observing a phenomenon, trying to understand what's going on there and why is it that, and the deep inquiry, the framing and the book writing. And so that's how I came to write multipliers. And I, it's been this incredible joy to see organizations all around the world, Silicon Valley, Silicon Slopes, Silicon Oasis, Silicon Plains, and manufacturing sites, healthcare, like to see organizations embrace these ideas, really challenge themselves and the way they're leading and embrace it deep down in their core.
Right. How can leaders deal with difficult, smart people and build trust within teams in the organizations?
Well, I do think the key to accessing people's intelligence is trust. And I hadn't seen that when I wrote the book, honestly. It wasn't until I had finished the book and I was with my mother and we were at some family gathering and, people are chit-chatting. And I overheard my mom say, "Oh, if I could describe Elizabeth's book," she calls me Elizabeth, of course, in one word, it would be trust. And this is my mom who had not only read the book, she had copy edited it for me so I could send it in clean to the publisher. And I was taken aback by this. What do you mean trust? And it really comes down to trust because, you know, most of what's written about leadership is that what leaders can do to get people to trust them.
Mhm.
Like, trust me, I have a vision. Trust me, I have a plan. Trust me, I have your best intentions in mind. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Like, trust me, I'm a good person. Which, in some ways, the more people ask you to trust them, the less you trust them.
Yeah. Yeah. Something's fishy.
Something's fishy. It's like when people say, "Oh, like, let me be honest." I'm like, "Well, were you not going to be honest? Why are you
Are you
doing
not honest?
Yeah, like, why is that an exception, not the rule?" But I think what multipliers really help me see is that if you want people to trust you, you need to show that you trust them.
Right.
That is the source of trust in organizations. That's where teams get built. And really the mindset of a multiplier is fundamentally that I believe the people who work with me are smart and well intended and want to make a big contribution. And my job is to, in many ways, just allow that to happen.
Mhm.
It's like when leaders signal, telegraph, constantly convey through their words, but more their actions, that I believe you're smart. I trust you can solve this problem. I trust you. I'm going to give you responsibility and ownership. I'm going to put you in charge. That's how trust gets built.
Is it the same for women? Is it harder to build trust with a female leader? Or is it, let me rephrase this, is it harder for a female leader to build trust with employees?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Um, because boy, you put a group of women in a room and there's like instant trust
Yeah.
in many ways, probably because there's sameness. And I think there's a lot of research that tells us that trust is harder to establish when there's difference.
Yeah.
When people come from a different country, a different culture, speak a different language, look a different way, have different racial backgrounds, and gender is one of those elements. So, yes, I do think it's harder to establish trust when there is difference in gender.
Hmm.
But I don't know that women themselves have a harder time establishing trust.
Right.
In some ways, I think women have a trust advantage.
Right.
Um, you know, I I once, when I was at Oracle, was asked by our president to be like this a spokesperson, an on-camera spokesperson for this big initiative we're rolling out. And I did not see myself in that role. I was really leading the effort, but like that, I wasn't supposed to be the person, the face to this. And I remember he saying, "No, no, Liz, we want you to do this." He's like, "You're like a mother of four kids. Everybody trusts you."
Wow.
And like that was a case where being female, in my case being a mom, like I think he thought that it came with some instant trust, like people trust your motives or something. So I don't know that being female is a disadvantage on trust, but I think anytime you've got a pool of difference where you have diversity, I think everyone has to work harder to establish trust because it's not our brain's default.
Right. What about, we spoke about multipliers. What about the impact players? What inspired you to write this book?
Mm. Well, I think what inspired me was a combination of two factors. One was hearing people's stories about, I call them warranty calls. And what that means, for me, what a warranty call is people who would say, "I read your book. I went to a multipliers workshop. I heard you speak. I did those things, and like nothing happened. Like I didn't get the response from my team that I wanted. Um, so it was that, and then also hearing like people's own diminisher stories and the effect that leaders can have on other people. So it was this combination that really led me to wonder, like, well, wait a minute, the leader has a set of things that they need to do for people to show up and play big and give their all of their best thinking and ideas. But there is another variable in this equation, and that is the way the contributor shows up. And this really came to a head when I was teaching a workshop in Silicon Valley up at Salesforce, and we're talking about leading like a multiplier. And there's this one, maybe an engineering manager who just kind of blurts out like, "Yeah," or maybe he raised his hand, but like, "Yeah, yeah, okay, I want to be a multiplier. I get it, but you can't multiply zero." And I thought, what is he talking about? And of course, I'm thinking he's saying the people on my team aren't smart, aren't capable, like they're zeros. But that wasn't what he was talking about. What he said was, as a leader, you've got to show up with the right mindsets, the right practices, but so do the people who work for you. Like they've got to show up with the right kind of mental game and the right kind of practices. And then when you bring like the really positive active leadership and positive active contributorship to a problem, to a challenge, to an opportunity, boom, that's where brilliance happens. And that is what got me thinking, I really want to understand not what do the best leaders do, as much as I now want to understand what do the best contributors do. And what do the people who are having outsized impact do? People delivering incredible value, people being given leadership opportunities and influence and power in organizations. And that's where I began studying the impact players of the workplace, the people who not only do phenomenal work and make a difference to the organization, but people who raise a level of play for the whole team.
Right. Was it hard? Was it hard to write either of these two books? I mean, was it, you were passionately driven, but was it still hard to actually write them?
Well, it depends on what you mean by hard. It's it's hard the way being pregnant is hard, which is like, okay, maybe it's a very natural phenomenon, but it can be exhausting and like labor. But in some ways, writing a book isn't hard because what you're doing is you're trying to let truth reveal itself. And oh goodness, that makes me think of, the Michelangelo quote or supposed um, saying attributed to him, which is like when he was sculpting the David statue. It wasn't like he was creating David. He was just like trying to like uncover David in the marble, like that concept. And in some ways, when you're writing a book, you could think of it as like, oh, I'm trying to like stuff a bunch of ideas in this. But another way to think about it is like there is truth in the research and in the data that this process uncovered, and I'm just trying to uncover what is true about how people work and how people respond and what people need to do their best work. So that part is easier, but it's not easy. It's a wrestle, it's a fight,
Yeah,
it's a challenge.
challenge. Right. The reason why I'm asking this is because um you're a female leader, writer, researcher. Pretty much when someone looks at you, they look at a role model. And I just wanted to ask you, what advice would you give females who are actually looking to you as a role model that you'd say, what would you say to them?
I think there's some advantages, and I think there's some pros and cons to having role models. And I think a wonderful thing about role models is you could admire what someone has done. You could look at their path. Um, you could look at maybe how they persisted with obstacles and how they dealt with challenge. But I think it's dangerous to try to emulate somebody else because nobody does you like no one else can do me like me, and like I can't do you like you. And I think what makes I want to step aside from this for a second. It's like I think one of the traps that women have fallen in, and these are traps that have been placed right in front of us, is that there is some ideal, like here's the kind of leader you should be. And like when I started leading, it was back in the 80s, and it was like women donned power suits and you had to be tough, um and they try to fit into a model that doesn't fit them very well. And they end up looking awkward and cumbersome. And they lose their effectiveness as leaders because they become like wannabes. They're trying to be like somebody else. And I know times where I've tried to be like somebody else, and that didn't work out so great for me. And um, back to the president at Oracle who told me, "Hey, we want you on your camera because you're a mom." I think it was several years later. We were just sitting in his office working on something, finishing a meeting, and he's like, Liz, I want to tell you why I like working with you. And this was someone who I had deep, deep respect for, probably it's 20 years my senior. Uh, he said, and this is back in the day, there are not a lot of women in leadership in tech. He's like, this is why I like working with you, because there's a lot of women who try to outmen the men. And they try to be like tougher, you know, meaner. And he says that it like you could tell, just it was hard for him to work in that.
Yeah.
It's like an ill-fitting suit,
Mhm.
like the power suit, man up. And he said, but then there are other women who like turn on the feminine charm, and are like, and he like, I have a hard time with that too. And he said, what I like about working with you is that you are just you. You're like
Right.
not trying to be a persona. And I think a lot of the personas, there were two big personas that like women were offered back then, and they're still a little present today. They're like two ill-fitting suits. One is the power suit, man up, be tough, be hard on everyone,
Yeah.
and earn respect this way. Uh, the other was like the mama bear, which is the protective, you know, um, let me just kind of like nurture and take care of people. And both of these are equally diminishing.
Right.
And I think what I found was this path to just be myself, but not my ragged self, because nobody likes the hot mess who like shows up like, oh, I can't figure out anything. It's like there's a lot that you hold inside while you're working stuff out. But I really believe that, and this is one of the great joys of my career, and I hope it's something I've made a contribution to, is that I think more and more women can show up as powerful leaders, not trying to be somebody else, but just being themselves, but their like sharpest, strongest, smartest version of themselves, but with their own style.
But I do have one final question. And given that you're a leadership coach and you've met so many people in leadership positions, what do you think is the most important investment that should be made for leaders by leaders to actually lead people?
So okay, I want to make sure I understand your question. Are we looking at the investment leaders
Build
need to make
leadership.
in their team, or
Yeah.
what we need to be doing to building like leaders of today and tomorrow?
Today and tomorrow. So what are the major investments to build leadership within the modern workplace? So for
Mhm.
today,
Well, okay, so it's an interesting question. Let's talk about what we tend to do. And I'm skeptical of all the things that we tend to do. We tend to run training programs. We tend to give people books. We tend to give people coaches. And we tend to spray like leadership onto people. And I think that helps. It certainly doesn't hurt, other than it might overwhelm people. But I don't know that just giving someone a book is going to turn them into a great leader. She says of her own book. It certainly doesn't hurt, but it's not the be all end all. Like what here are the things that I think really move the needle. Uh, we'll start, I guess, with the book. Groups of people talking about the ideas in the book and having now a common language to talk about the challenges and problems of leadership, that goes a long way. But just
right.
individuals kind of reading them at their desk or at home on the couch, I'm not sure that moves the needle. Uh, we spend a lot of time thinking about who are good leaders, but I don't think we spend, like, who are the up and coming leaders. I don't think we spend enough time thinking about who should we who should we have lead people during really um, formative experiences.
Mhm.
Like a bad leader early in one's career can really take you down the wrong path
Right.
as a leader yourself. And so I think we should put a lot more thought into who are the leaders who deserve to be entrusted with newcomers, with up and comers. That I think moves the needle. Giving people stretch assignments and being really thoughtful about how do we keep people in just lightweight struggle throughout their career so they don't get too comfortable or they don't just crash and burn because the challenge was too big. Like, how do we get that right level of tension so that people are growing through the challenge rather than growing by sitting in a class? And again, I'm not opposed to organizations investing in classes and coaching, but it needs to be done at the time when people need it, or I think it's
Yeah. The waste of
an
time.
unproductive investment. Yeah, we should be getting a lot more for our investment.
Right. Thank you very much, Liz Wiseman. It was great speaking with you, and I hope you have a great day ahead.
Well, you too. Thank you. Thank you for your time.